Welcome, everyone, to the How to Get the Most Out of College podcast. There's a lot of talk about where to go to college, but not nearly enough about how to go to college. And it's the everyday decisions that drive your success. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've been a consultant to more than 100 colleges and universities, helping them improve their student experience. And I'm the author of How to Get the Most Out of College, where I take what I've learned about how college works and make it work for you. Success in college is a team sport. Yes, you have to have your own motivation, your own skills, but you also have to be part of something. You have to be part of a network, a community. You have to have support from friends and family, staff and faculty, and all the services that they offer. And so I'm so excited to have Andrea Malkin Brenner, the creator of the Talking College card deck and the co-author of How to College, with us today to really dive into this topic of building your support network. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell me a little bit about building a support network. What is a support network? How do you build it?
I think that there's a misconception that students need to go from being dependent to being independent overnight when they transition to college. And that is not actually the truth. The truth is that a support network of peers, of family, and most importantly, of campus resources really helps a student thrive on the college campus. So I would say it's incredibly important to understand what a support network means and for a student to set it up well in advance of actually reaching that campus.
That's great. Can you give us maybe a story of a student who successfully created this kind of network and felt that support?
Sure. So a little bit about me. I was at American University in Washington, D.C. for 25 years, 20 of them as a faculty member. So I invited many a first year student into my office hours. And I created the first year experience course at AU. And so I spent a lot of time talking to students and to families about, how challenging it was to sort of find your people and fit in and understand where to go when you needed help. I can tell you that I had a lot of students come to my office right after orientation and ask questions that I knew were covered in orientation. Where is the writing center? Where is the tutoring center? How do I get help with my statistics homework? And I think I realized then and there that orientation can be very disorienting to a lot of students. They're really focused on the social interaction, understandably appropriate for their developmental level. And so some of the information presented to them by the institution kind of gets lost. And so I've found myself over the years answering a lot of first year students calls for help, which is, I need somebody to proofread my paper for me, especially students with English as a second language. That's a real challenge on a lot of US campuses. And there are ample resources, but a lot of times they're just mentioned to students during orientation and the students aren't listening or they're not sort of prepared to record that information and go seek it out.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. And I empathize and sympathize with those students and also all the staff that are trying to help them and figure out the best way to make those connections and get the word out. So diving in a little bit more deeply, let's break down what are the components of the support network. You talked about peers, you talked about services. Take us through the different components.
Absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, you've got your family support network. In high school, a lot of students rely on parents and families as their sort of first line of defense or their first support network. And that's absolutely age appropriate. But when the student transitions to college, they really need to make that family connection as their support kind of in the background. I'd like to see students stepping up, using their peers, using staff, for example, RAs in a residence hall, using faculty, using other staff members as resources and having, of course, your parents are always going to be there in the background, but I'd love to see those folks on the campus who have been trained to help first year students in their transition kind of step up as a first line of support. So I would say first line is family and the appropriate place for that familial support. I would say peers are really important. And I am asked frequently by families, how does my kid meet friends in college? And it's challenging for a lot of students because many of them have come from educational environments in their hometown where they haven't had to meet a new friend since maybe even kindergarten. And it can be very challenging, especially for students with social anxiety. So I would say finding your people either in your residence hall, but more importantly, in your areas of passion. So maybe you're a trumpet player, maybe you're into theater, maybe you want to write for the student newspaper, you're into a particular church group, whatever that is, whatever that area is, that is your passion, immediately try to connect with those people because those will probably be some of the greatest peer connections you have. I think there's an idealized version, maybe and even in American film cinema, that, your roommate is going to be your best friend for life. And that's not always the case. I think we need to sort of come to a realization that best roommates aren't necessarily best friends. So peers are the second one. So I talked about family peers. And then I would say really very important are those school support networks. So that's support networks that include sort of physical and mental health, academics, and then also professional planning resources. Those are three big areas. And then I would also throw in the importance of affinity groups, first gen student support, students with disabilities, finding support through campus culture. There are lots of different ways to receive support within sort of a higher ed structure.
That's a great checklist in a way for students to think about. They've got their family, they've got their peers, they've got these services, faculty, staff, whether it's, writing or counseling or advising or career. I think about my own experience and so many of the students I talk to, the peer mentor or peer advisor or the RA, that student that maybe can both relate to where you're at, but maybe has a little bit more experience or even some training, such a great bridge between those worlds. As students are building these networks, I feel like one of the biggest challenges is you're with people or you're meeting people that are maybe similar to you, but also different from you. And you kind of have to have both, right? You have to have the safety maybe and the security of people that you share that passion with, or you have similar lived experience or background, but you also need people that know stuff that you don't. I remember interviewing an international student who, her only friends were international students and they all had the same questions and nobody had the answers. And she actually found the answers by starting to play a sport so that she was with a different set of people. So I would love to hear your advice on, as students are building these networks, how do they navigate that world of kind of comfort, sameness, familiarity with like difference, diversity, contrast?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And both are really important. We know that the majority of high school students in the US grow up in homogeneous communities. So most of the people in their high school may share the same race, socioeconomic status, even religion, depending on the area that they're coming from. And so again, if you join, if you're an international student and you only hang out with international students based on your example, you're going to get one monolithic view of the college experience through the international perspective, international student perspective. But if you're an international student and into photography and you join the photography club, you're going to immediately have a diversity of students in there, all have this one passion. So that's why I mentioned passions as such an important part of that support network, because I do feel that's a built-in way to sort of meet a diverse group of students who have one thing that you all have in common, but you could be from very, very varied backgrounds. And I think that's a wonderful way to start learning to talk across difference, communicate, as you mentioned, with a teammate. There's a different level of communication with a team than you would have, in your residence hall. So I think that's absolutely key. And when I talk to students about, how many clubs should I be involved in? How do I mix it all and juggle it all? I always suggest that, they at least start with 3 different areas of clubs and organizations, that they can always drop one, that they should find something that is an area of passion, something that is an area related to a potential career, and something that is an area related to community building or giving back. And I think it's a great way to start. So in those 3 experiences, it might be, a band could be their passion area. The area of community could be, LGBTQ student resources, something where you're going to find a community of like-minded folks with maybe some similar experience. And then something where it comes to your sort of career focus, even if you don't know what that is, that might be a psychology club or a business fraternity, something where you could see yourself really connecting with people sort of on a career or academic level.
That's great. That's our second 3-part, wonderfully useful checklist. We had family, peers, and support services, support staff. And now we have 3 areas of involvement: a passion, a career, and a way to give back, a way to be part of a community. I think that's a great way. So as students are getting involved, they might encounter some challenges. And you mentioned perhaps social anxiety or haven't had to, make a new friend since kindergarten. What are some of the challenges students may face as they're trying to build this support network and find their people, and what can they do about it?
Another great question. I would say that I think there's a misconception of sort of the 18, 19-year-old brain where they think that there's one path. And if I joined this club or I started hanging out with this group and they weren't for me and I didn't just didn't feel like I connected, then I've gone awry. And I think it's really important to let students, especially those transitioning to their first year of college, realize that, college and life, the life of adulting is filled with many different varied paths. And you might turn one way and realize it's not the right path and you turn a different way. I hear a lot of, I made a mistake, I wasted time doing this. To me, all of that is a growth experience. So I think that's something that as adults, we don't do such a great job of communicating with high school grads about what the transition to college will look like. Along those same lines, if you find a friend group and they're in your residence hall and they're friends by convenience because they live right there, that's fine. And that can also be temporary. You don't need to carry those friends through your 4 years. You might find different people in classes or affinity groups or passion areas. And I would say that another thing that we do is we don't really talk very clearly about what adulting means. I talk about this when I go to high schools and talk to parents and talk to students. And I find it fascinating when, if you talk to a bunch of high school students or young college students and you ask them what adulting means, I think that many of them, I would say, think that it means doing it all on your own. But if you ask a bunch of adults, 40 plus adults, I think that they would say it means figuring out my weaknesses. It means figuring out how to get help when I need it. And so I would love for not only sort of a higher education message, but sort of the larger adult world of those of us who help college students transition to sort of use that adulting definition with our students and say, adulting doesn't mean doing it all on your own. It means learning how to build support networks. It means learning how to get help, knowing that asking questions is really, really actually an adult behavior.
That's great. I love the idea that the way to build this support network means accepting or getting more comfortable, letting go. There may be one friend group that you kind of grow out of, and accepting that you're going to make some mistakes, try some things that don't work, and that it's back to the beginning. It's a team sport. You don't have to do it all on your own. How does a student know when they've got this support network? What does it look and feel like when they've got this working well for them?
I don't know that there is one sort of answer. I think it's different for every student. Some students come to college, you know, very well prepared academically, but struggle socially. Others come in and really struggle making friends, but the academics is no problem for them. I think that everybody is different. I think students have to listen to their inner voice and realize that by age 18 or 19, they're probably pretty aware if a group doesn't feel like the right people. And then, college should be challenging. And I think that's another message that we need to be giving to our students is if it's hard, you're doing it right. If it's too easy, you're probably not pushing yourself enough. But if it's extremely, extremely challenging, you need a wider support network. So if you get your first paper back in college and you get a lower grade than you were expecting, there's a lot of ways you could go, right? Do you go to your professor or your graduate TA or even an undergraduate TA to ask for help? What did I do wrong? It's not about changing your grade, but about doing better the next time. How can I learn from that? So that's sort of using academic resources for this paper. Another piece might be time management. Maybe you didn't do well on the paper because you were too busy with other stuff and you didn't set the right amount of time for this. So that might be an academic success center that can help you on campus. So that same grade might drive you to a different resource center. Maybe you really fall apart with this lousy grade and you might need some mental health counseling. You may need to figure out how to handle your stress. And so that might be the counseling center. I think that we can take an example of any paper grade and really talk about different resources that are in some way related to that. And every student might have a very different experience.
That's such a wonderful example. It might be about the writing style. and you could go to the writing center for that, or it might be about, the graph in figure 1 didn't tell the right story. And, the data lab is the place to get help. Learning from those mistakes, pulling on those threads and using that to grow for the next challenge, I think makes so much sense. This has been a great conversation. I love all these wonderfully specific, tried and true bits of advice you have about a support network and all the insights about why it's important. So thank you, Andrea. And I hope people check out not only How to College, but the Talking College card deck.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And check out elliottfelix.com for all the episodes and the articles I've written, talks I've given, and more information about the book.